Welcome to Fully Booked, the bookish podcast where I'll chat about all things book and reading related. Whether you're a new or a pro reader, there's something for everyone to learn. I'm here to help you on your reading journey and find that next great read that will keep you fully booked. Hello readers, and welcome to episode 62 of Fully Booked. I'm your host Natalie, and today's episode is going to be a very fun one, at least for me, because we are going to be talking about all of my recent 5-star reads. Now, when I originally planned today's episode out, I actually wanted to talk about every single 5-star read of all time, but reflecting back a little bit on all the books that I've rated 5 stars, I think some of the more past 5-star reads don't really hold true to that very high rating. So I didn't really feel it was right to discuss them. But having said that, we still have a list of 10 books to talk about in today's episode, and 8 out of the 10 were read in 2025, so they are very fresh in my memory still. But before we get into all of my 5-star reads, I wanted to quickly debrief Bridgerton Season 4 with all of you. I know it's been a little bit of time by the time you guys are watching or listening to this, but I felt it was right since the second half of the season is now out and I have completed it. I have to say, I think Season 4 is one of my favorite seasons out of the series so far, along with Season 2. I think those two are in my top rankings for the Bridgerton series. I wasn't as much of a fan of Season 1 and Season 3, but this season just really did it for me for some reason. Not only just the overall, again, fairy tale-esque feel of it, but I really just liked our plot, our storyline, and the direction that it took. I also really liked the character arc that we went on with both Sophie and Benedict. I think both of them had a lot to face and overcome. I actually feel like despite their class differences and upbringings, I feel like they were actually very similar people. They just had very similar personalities and character flaws and insecurities. And so I think it actually made them a very good fit for each other. And I'm just really happy with how the season ended. And I know that the wedding scene was a little bit shorter compared to some of the previous seasons where it was built more within the season versus this season. They just did a post-credit scene for some reason, but I actually really enjoyed how it was short and sweet, and I thought it was a great way to end the season. And of course, I could see how they're definitely setting up for season 5, so I really can't wait. I'm just really hoping that the next season is going to be out much sooner, hopefully by next year, because I feel like they've been taking about every 2 years in between seasons. And I feel like for me, it just loses the momentum a bit because I definitely forget about the show in between seasons. Yeah, I haven't checked when the next season is coming out or if there's any news of that even, but I'm really hoping for 2027 for season 5 because I really can't wait for the next Bridgerton story. And yeah, if any of you guys have also finished and watched Bridgerton season 4, then please let me know below and what your thoughts are. And then for current reads, I technically have 2 because I just finished one book literally before I started filming this podcast episode, but that's going to be in a special video for you guys, so I'm actually not going to talk about that one right now, and I'm going to save that. But my other current read is actually Project Hail Mary. I'm still about halfway through into this. I've been taking this one a little bit slow in between some other books that I'm reading right now, and I have to say, I'm actually glad that I've been pacing myself with this one because I am just really enjoying the ride that this book is taking me on. For me, it's really living up to the hype. For me, the way that Andy Weir writes this main character just works for me, and the type of humor that he uses. I feel like there have been so many laugh out loud scenes and moments for me, and I just didn't expect to enjoy this book so much because obviously some of the science and the equations behind everything are kind of going over my head a little bit, but the other parts of this book are just so enjoyable that it doesn't even matter if I don't understand every single part. And I'm just loving this book, and I can't wait to see where else it's going to take me. Anyways, let's start diving into my 5-star reads. So the first one I have for you guys, I feel like is pretty important because I have read it a total of 3 times now, so clearly I love it so much, and that is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I think that's how you say it. This one for me has just become an all-time favorite, and to me, it's like a modern classic. It's just very good. I feel like it's one of those books that you can just return to through different stages of your life, and you're always going to get something a little bit different and new out of it. I think especially in particular, I just have learned new things and seen different things about Charlie's character each read around. Because, for example, the first time that I read this book, I was actually the same age as Charlie is in this book. He's a freshman in high school, and I was also a freshman in high school. So I feel like I really felt the raw and fresh emotions that he feels as a youth and in coming of age. But then when I read it in my early 20s and then now my late 20s, because I actually reread this about 6 months ago now, I feel like I really started to understand and see more of the different relationship dynamics that he has in this story, whether it was with his friend group or his family. In particular, the last read around, I really felt and thought a lot more about how others actually perceive you from the things that they see you doing, even when you were trying in your own way. And I think I noticed that a lot this past read around because it's something I've been kind of thinking about as I've been going and entering different stages of my life. Just thinking about how I show up in relationships. I actually feel like I honestly still am a lot like Charlie. I always feel like I should be doing more or saying more so others know exactly how I'm thinking and feeling and know that I'm also thinking about them. I care about them. But sometimes it's really hard for me to just show up in the way that they want me to. And that's just what I noticed a lot about Charlie and his relationships. I just felt like a lot of the other characters didn't necessarily appreciate him, even though he was showing up in the way that he knew how to. And I think that was something just so heartbreaking to read about, but something that made me reflect a lot at the same time. And yeah, that just made me love this book that much more. I will say, though, this is a pretty hard read. There are a lot of things talked about, from sexual assault to domestic violence, substance abuse, etc. And also not all of this is shown in as much detail in the movie. So just a warning if you're trying to go back and pick this book up. Even despite these topics that come up in this book, this is just, again, such a great book to me, so worth the read. This is always one of the books that I recommend to people when they ask what is my favorite book. I will always recommend this one. So now I am recommending it to you guys. And then the next book I'm going to talk about is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. This one, I can honestly just say, is quirky in the best way. So I guess it kind of depends on your personality and what kind of stories and writing work for you, because this could probably be a case of the quirkiness in this book will either work for you or won't. But for me, it just really worked. It's also just a great mix of contemporary historical women's fiction. And I liked that this book had a hopeful ending. And of course, if you love hearing about dogs or hearing a story from a dog's perspective, then this is going to be for you. I will say, I feel like when I read some reviews about this book a year or two ago, I can definitely see how some people do not like our FMC in this one. She is kind of unlikable, and I feel like she's kind of supposed to be. But I feel like personally, I just was able to really understand her when thinking about kind of the big picture and everything that she had gone through and the challenges during that time. And I'm going to say one quick disclaimer now, in that I think one criticism that I saw when reading the reviews as well is that our FMC does go through some struggles as a female during the 1950s, 60s, but she probably doesn't struggle nearly as much since she does still have the privilege of being a white woman versus being a black woman or other women of color, I guess, during that time. And I do acknowledge that. I understand that as well. But I still think this was a good story to, again, somewhat understand just some of the struggles that women would have faced during that time, even if certain people did still have some privileges compared to others. I think this was just one version of one woman's story who could have lived and existed during that time period, and I still think it was a good and important story to tell. Obviously, it's great to have lots of other different perspectives and backgrounds of women from that period of time. I'm just acknowledging that this is just one, and I honestly still enjoyed it for what it was. Otherwise, this was honestly, to me, well written, very well rounded in terms of the storyline, and I just loved our whole cast of characters and each of their own struggles that they went through. I feel like were relatable to all of us in one way or another. This next book definitely takes me back to my later high school years, because that's also when the movie for this book came out, and that is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. Now, I have to say with this one, I do understand, and I would say Is it a bit pretentiously written? Yes. Is it overly existential? Yes. And I did feel that even reading it as an adult. But is it still 5 stars? Yes. I just feel like John Green is able to depict humanity and suffering in such a raw and vulnerable way that I just do not experience with other authors. He writes to the point where you feel like you are going through the character's emotions and experiences with them versus just reading about them, if that makes any sense. I just feel like the way he's able to write is very immersive and it just really sticks with me for some reason. And like I just briefly mentioned, I don't think all teenagers honestly are this existential and pretentious in the way he writes how they think and act, but I feel like regardless of that, I still really enjoy, again, the way he writes and the way he writes inner monologue in such a raw and honest way. It's actually quite beautiful and it really sticks with me as a reader. The way he's able to write so beautifully about these tragic circumstances that these characters are in, I just feel like it hits me so much every time I read, and even just the essence of his writing just really sticks in my head, even after having read his books. I actually would partially say if you like very existential, kind of angsty reads, if you're like a fan of Sally Rooney, like Normal People, for example, I think you would also like The Fault in Our Stars and probably some of his other books. Although I have to say, this one's definitely my favorite of his. I haven't enjoyed some of his other books nearly as much. If you like any of those things, then you'll also enjoy this a lot. Moving into my more recent 5-star reads, we're starting with The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This was actually the very first book that I read from her, and it's my only 5-star read of hers so far because I still haven't gotten into The Nightingale, as you guys know. But this one, I honestly just enjoyed the journey that we went on with our female characters so much. I feel like we got to see so much of their strengths. And obviously, a lot of this book is about survival in the literal wilderness, what you need to do to survive physically. But I feel like a lot of the book was also about the circumstances that our female characters were in and the tragic things that they had to survive and endure through. So I feel like survival in just all different forms was a huge theme in this book, and I just loved the depiction of it. Again, the depiction of coming of age, womanhood, female relationships overall, but also especially the female familial relationships in this book were just amazing to read about. And one thing I will say about any Kristen Hanna novel in general, at least from the ones that I've read so far, is that I feel like she is really good at endings. I feel like sometimes the middle of her books feel slow and I'm not always enjoying every single moment, but I feel like the way she just wraps up and brings everything completely full circle for our characters and gives them a more happy or hopeful ending just really resonates with me. And she's able to do this even when it seems like all is lost, there's no hope left. She just turns it around somehow every time. And it just really sticks with me as a reader. This book also definitely solidified that I do want to continue reading all of her backlist, anything that she writes. I just will be picking it up. This next one is actually not quite a 5 stars, but I did rate it a 4.75 stars. So I felt like that was close enough to warrant discussing in today's episode, and that was A Song to Drown Rivers by Anne Liang. I barely have any bad notes for this one. That's how close to a perfect 5-star rating it was. There was hardly anything that I just disliked, and there was just so much to like about this one, for me at least. The writing, absolutely stunning. Not just overall, but in terms of our different setting and scene descriptions that we get throughout this, especially because we're set in ancient China in this one. So we have some sort of different historical elements going on. And I would definitely say that if you're looking to get into fantasy, but you don't know where to start, or you're not as much of a fantasy reader yet, then I feel like this one is a really good start because we have, honestly, very slight magical elements, and it really reads more historical fiction. It's very much historical leaning fantasy. And it's a lot more mythological rather than this very intense, detailed, high-stakes plot and world going on. I think it'd be pretty easy to get into, again, if you're not as much of a fantasy reader like I am. But I will warn you guys, while this one was so beautiful overall, as well as the ending will rip your heart out. So if you don't like books with more tragic endings, then I don't know how you're going to end up feeling about this one. But honestly, even that, this book was just still very much worth the read. Then switching up for the next one, my next 5-star read for you guys is The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry by Gabrielle Zevin. This is just another wonderfully heartwarming story. It's a story full of hope and second chances. And I feel like for me, second chance in life stories are one of my favorites when I gravitate towards any literary or general fiction. And Gabrielle Zevin just writes in the kind of way and with the kind of quirk that, likewise to Lessons in Chemistry, just really works for me. It scratches that itch in my brain. It's just funny, honest, and uplifting, just all at the same time. And in this story in particular, we do have this very odd situation that comes up early on, and despite the oddity, maybe even the absurdity of it, it's able to bring together and tie all our characters on this small island town in the best way, where everyone just is getting this second chance, not just AJ, although of course he is still very much the main focus of this story, and I'm really going to talk about it in another minute, but I feel like if you really enjoyed A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman, then you're also going to enjoy this one, because both of them have kind of that same funny, uplifting, heartwarming tone to them. Of course, there are also sad things that happen in this story and that we go through with the characters. You very much feel the range of emotions with them as well. But overall, I would say, again, it's more on the hopeful and heartwarming side. So if you're looking for another 5-star read, say after reading A Song to Drown Rivers, then I feel like this would be your next best contrasting read. And then the remaining 4 books on this list, I think it makes sense to just lump them all together and talk about this author as a whole, because he has just been a 5-star author overall, every single one of his books for me. And this shouldn't surprise you guys, but it is Fredrik Backman, and I have read Beartown, Us Against You, A Man Called Ove, and My Friends, all technically within 2025. Or at the very least, I started Us Against You at the very end of 2025, so it kind of counts. And honestly, Fredrik Backman, I feel like he's just such a great author because his writing style is just very consistent across all of these different types of stories that he's written, and he is just able to, again, write in that rare way that depicts humanity in the best and the worst ways. I feel like he's really just not afraid to voice the harshness of reality in such a raw and honest way that it's almost kind of jarring at times as a reader. I think a lot of authors tiptoe a little bit more around certain issues and how things actually are in the world and society right now, but I feel like he'll just go right out and say things, and I actually just find it kind of refreshing to read at times. And I really just like all of these different types of stories that he's written, because I feel like we see so many different types of characters throughout his books, whether it's different ages or ethnic or socioeconomic backgrounds. I just feel like we get such a good mix, and I just enjoy reading across all of these different stories. If I were to recommend one to you guys, though, out of all the ones I read, I think it's no surprise, I'd still recommend My Friends by him. I think this one I just enjoyed the most personally because of the certain subject matter in this one. I also really liked how he tied our characters together, where they seemed like they're very different people coming from very, very different worlds on the outside, but then once they actually talk and get to know each other, they actually realize how similar that we all are and just some of the universal experiences and things that we share as humans. I think he just did that in such a beautiful way, specifically in My Friends, so that's the one I would recommend. But honestly, I feel like you could really pick up any book of his and any one could be a 5-star read. And of course, I do have to say that his books do have varying tones to them, so I'd say that Beartown and Us Against You are definitely more on the bleak and depressing side, whereas A Man Called Ove and My Friends are more on the uplifting side. But despite the variance in tones, I feel like his books are just still such a wonderful experience overall as a reader. And with that, those are all my 5-star reads as of 2026. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and please let me know in the comments or in my DMs what is one of your 5-star reads. I'd love to hear the books that you've all enjoyed personally. And of course, as always, rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening, or if you're watching right now and you're not subscribed, then go and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because all episodes and videos will be uploaded there. So you'll definitely want to be notified when anything new goes up. We are going to have some exciting episodes ahead, especially with the start of spring upon us. And lastly, Early Access Fridays are still happening on Buy Me a Coffee. I'm going to be honest, I haven't been good at uploading in real time on Instagram and whatnot, so I do apologize for that. But if you're watching right now, then you can know that it is still happening. So if you do want to get early access, then you can go on over to the Buy Me a Coffee link. The link is always in the show notes or video description. And that is just another way to support Fully Booked if you choose to do so. Having said all that, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you were able to take away something, and be sure to follow the podcast for more bookish content. Until next time, stay fully booked, and I'll talk to you soon.